You are listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network.
وتكلم من هناك لشوارزنيجر.
Va a pegarle Ronaldinho Gaucho. Ya lo hace. Pierna derecha, directo al arco. ¡Golazo! ¡Golazo!
This is Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio, your new live show about the beautiful game in all its glory, with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee. MLS, EPL, La Liga, Champions League, all is fair game. Powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us at sportspodcastingnetwork.com.
Good day, good night, and welcome back to Soccer Today. It's Wednesday, and Duane, Champions League has started. But who knew that Mother Nature would have the first victory against City and Mönchengladbach yesterday?
Yeah, well, I guess that's better than losing 7-0. I guess you could look at it that way in terms of
Or 5.
Games. Yeah, well, we'll talk about that in the final block. But no, certainly I wasn't really paying attention. I was doing other work, so I had to drag myself all the way across the city here because I have some internet issues right at the moment, which is why we're doing this over Skype on my phone, which is if you're curious about that. So I had to drag myself to the pub. I get all the way to the pub and I walk in, they look at me and go, "What, you haven't heard?" I'm like, "Oh, good God." So that was a good use of my time in the afternoon yesterday, Kevin.
Yes, so Mother Nature won. But yes, last night as well, a trophy was raised in North America. The oldest North American soccer trophy was won yesterday. U.S. Open Cup, FC Dallas with the 4-2 victory.
It's the oldest consecutively awarded trophy.
Oldest
I don't want
something.
to. Sorry, Kevin. Go ahead.
I said it's the oldest something. Like it's old.
Yeah, in 1914. They claim they like to claim that it's the oldest trophy in American sports, but what they mean is it's the oldest consecutively awarded trophy in American sports, which is significant. And I'm not diminishing that account. I just know we have a lot of hockey fans that would listen to this that will quite rightly point out that the Stanley Cup is 21 years older than the U.S. Open Cup. However, nonetheless, the U.S. Open Cup is very old. It is much older than Kevin, even older than me, and that's saying something there. Dallas with its first win, and I think this is the more important storyline regardless of the age of the cup, though, its first trophy victory in 19 seasons, and that is a significant trophy drought, the longest that had existed within Major League Soccer prior to last night, and FC Dallas has now broken it, and I believe that trophy drought record would now go to the team that they beat, New England. I'd have to look that up to absolutely prove that, but I'm pretty sure that New England is now the longest drought out there. Although, did they win a supporter shield in the mid 2000s? I'm not sure, Kevin. I'd have to look that up.
I couldn't tell you that for sure, but no, interesting there in FC Dallas as well. Formerly owned, no, actually still owned by the Hunt family, and finally won that trophy. A few years ago, they had that chance too, but they won the trophy with their family name on it, which makes it a little bit more special. So for FC Dallas, a great atmosphere. You saw the celebration in the locker room. They took it seriously. They took that victory as a reward for their consistent play, not just in US Open Cup, but in the MLS this season as well. And that trophy might be the difference to continue with their motivation to get more this year because they have an opportunity for the double.
Yeah, well, the treble even.
Yeah.
We maybe have a discussion about that because there's arguments about what a treble is, what a proper treble is. It's so fandom when you get into that stuff. But nonetheless, they certainly have the opportunity to win 2 or 3 trophies this year. It is interesting to me that they did rest players on the weekend for this U.S. Open Cup because they were playing Colorado and they could have almost assured themselves of the Supporters' Shield with a win over the Rapids last weekend. They of course lost that game, although the Rapids sort of did what the Rapids do and only got one shot on goal that went in, I believe is what the stat was, and they lost, or they won, pardon me, the Rapids did. So yeah, it is just interesting to me that Dallas was clearly prioritizing the U.S. Open Cup. And it does beg the question. I asked last night, actually. I have a couple poll questions that I put out today that we'll maybe talk about a little bit. I asked last night what they thought about the U.S. Open Cup, and I gave 4 options. One was that they cared more about it than the league, which and I also included the Voyageurs Cup. So if you were Canadian, you could flip U.S. Open Cup to Voyageurs Cup. So whether you care more about it than the league, whether you care the same about it as the league, whether you care about it but a little less than the league, or whether you don't care at all. And I found it interesting that there was a significant amount. I think it was it was 38% of respondents cared about it at least as much as the league. Mostly, there was only 11% that cared about it more than the league, but 38% in total cared almost as much, or as equal as the league. And I found that kind of interesting, Kevin.
No, exactly. Well, it's a tournament that because of the scarcity, maybe because of the special vibe around it, especially in the supporters section where you're excited. It's a cup match. It's all or nothing. You lose, you're out. It has a little something different than the league. It has like a playoff vibe to it in the middle of a season. So there's a different approach to those games as a fan and as a player, and that shows in the last minute moments controversy. You have a lot more going on in those games because sometimes late in the game a team will go for it. Those aspects to no tomorrow football makes for those games more intriguing, more fun, especially in the dog days of the MLS season in the summer where it gets a little stale. You got that Open Cup or Voyageurs Cup earlier on this season that has a different flair to it.
Yeah, well, it's a parallel competition, which is unique to soccer, obviously, especially in North America, where a lot of fans just don't quite, not so much engaged fans that listen to podcasts like this, but a lot of fans that maybe just to go out to a couple games a year have a little difficulty wrapping their head around it, which is why I believe that the attendances sometimes suffer. But it's the same thing. The same kind of conversations about the U.S. Open Up can be had about the Voyageurs Cup, and I've had them many times about the Voyageurs Cup in terms of where it really stands, is that it really, really matters to the hardcore, to the fans that are most engaged, that are most day-to-day involved with the team, the fans that are most likely to call their MLS team their favorite team of all sports teams in their market. So, like you're not a Dallas Stars fan or a Rangers fan, you're an FC Dallas fan, right? Fans like that are more likely to care about this thing more than the other stuff, or at least as much as the other stuff. And I think that that's a significant thing because that matters, because MLS, I believe, is unique in the sense that it really does rely on that. I like to call them engaged fans, hardcore fans, engaged fans, a great deal to sort of drive the product and to drive the marketing when you see the supporter sections and all that sort of stuff. So a competition that matters to that type of fan, I think, should be celebrated a little bit more than maybe some of the attendance might suggest otherwise. And if the family of four that comes out to 2-3 games a year, and I don't want to dismiss them as not being important or fans or real or whatever. I'm just saying that they're not as engaged. The fact they're not going, I don't think should diminish the amount of attention a tournament like this gets, and I don't think it has. I think that amongst the niche media that follows this game, that there is a lot of attention driven to the U.S. Open Cup. Hell, we're talking about it here in Canada, and I saw a lot of people, a lot of Canadians in my feed talking about it, watching the game last night too. So clearly, MLS fans care about this competition, and that's what matters, right, Kevin?
No, exactly, because there is a spot in the CONCACAF Champions League that is awarded to FC Dallas now for next year. So they have an opportunity to extend their brand to the Champions League and have a run at that tournament, another side tournament that will bring some excitement in Dallas next year. And they have the opportunity as well as a team that's in form, playing well. Yeah, they lost a couple big games this season by like 5 goals, but when it rains and pours in Dallas, just like in real life, but on the soccer pitch, more often than not this season, they had great results. And there was not even a third of the season last. Dallas is in a position to go for the Supporters Shield and to go into the playoff with momentum. That is a blueprint that we have seen, maybe not the Supporters Shield part, but going into the playoff with momentum. And the U.S. Open Cup kind of starts that momentum.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's important, I think, to win stuff. Winning stuff matters. It's why people that dismiss the importance of the Voyageurs Cup are missing the point sometimes. You're winning something. I think that if you look at TFC's turnaround this year, you can start at that Voyageurs Cup win. That last gasp shot by Will Johnson is kind of what started that charge, which has now put them in a position to potentially win the East and maybe even challenge Dallas for
Hashtag winning.
Hashtag winning, yeah, sure, it matters. Kevin, before we get into talk about trebles and all that, I think I want to end that and whether what's a real treble and all that sort of stuff. Let's look a little bit at the actual game yesterday, and it was a dominant performance by Dallas. Some beautiful goals in the game, very well played game in terms of offense. I mean, I think there was some defensive gaps to play out there for sure, but nonetheless, it was an entertaining game to watch. The diving header for the second goal there, the Urruti's dramatics, his first goal with that sort of flip-up half volley was was something that, that's a Sports Center type of goal that you'd see, right? It was a beautiful goal there. But one of the big talking points, though, and we were talking a bit off air about this, was the penalty at the end of the first half, which I believe probably was the moment that put the nail in the coffin for the Rebs. They did get that one sort of goal back to make it 4-2 at the end. But, there was a lot of anger on the pitch at the time, and that's, emotions run high in those type of situations. But the replay clearly showed the defender holding the attacker's arm. And if we want the sport to be dramatic and to have goals in it and to let the skill play, we've got to get that out of it. So I have zero problem. And Toledo has made some bizarre penalty calls in the past, but I have zero problem with that one. If you're holding the defender's hand, it's not going to get called a lot. You're right, but you're playing with fire at that point, Kevin.
No, exactly. And it was 2-1 when it happened, 3-1. It's still the game. Dallas was deserving of that victory. It's not like that call changed everything. It was a goal that put Dallas in a more dominant position, but it wasn't the be-all, end-all of this game. Dallas played and was worthy of that victory. Never mind that call.
Yeah, and Arruti, it's funny, Taylor, Rudy scored the fourth goal, obviously, as well in the second half. Nice little finish, little thing. It was funny on the broadcast to the Twelman, just had finished bashing him, and then he had a good, not bashing him so much, but sort of being mildly critical of Arruti's finishing ability, which is something that has sort of plagued him throughout his career. And then he, of course, breaks through it and makes one of the best finishes you'll see all year on a partial breakaway. So I thought that was kind of fun, but Twelman, of course, was making fun of himself immediately after that. So you got to like that about Taylor, who's become one of the best broadcasters in soccer in North America, to be honest, over the past few years. And that's not something I really anticipated. I would have said, I should have said 3 or 4 years ago. So, Twelman, hats off and a hat tip to you for having a sense of humor and continuing to improve your craft.
Duane, Kevin, what's a treble? What would you consider a treble in North American soccer? Either a Canadian treble or North American?
This isn't complicated to me. It's whether you win three
trophies
in a season. And look, I know that a lot of people like to get caught up, and it becomes into kind of like banter and fandom and all that. And especially, I deliberately poking the bear a little bit last night when I said, just as a reminder, Dallas isn't the only team that could win a treble this year in Major League Soccer. And one of the editors at MLSsoccer.com immediately responded, yeah, you're right, Toronto could do it too. So they get it out there. It's a different treble. And I think that this is where American fans sometimes get their back up about this, because they look at the Voyageurs Cup and they see how few teams are in it and sort of suggest that means it doesn't matter, which is ridiculously arrogant to say that it doesn't matter. And you really need to kind of give your head a shake if you believe that. It's the National Cup of Canada. Of course it matters. There's a Champions League spot on the line. So to me, winning a treble or a double really comes down to simple math. It's whether you have won 3, we'll stick with treble, whether you've won 3 trophies that have a competitive element to them. So a competitive reward to them, either a trophy, a league title, or a spot in an international competition. So I'm excluding the Trillium Cup jump out there. Otherwise, TFC's already on a double if I include that. So I'm excluding that stuff because it doesn't have a competitive reward to it. You're not getting into the, there's no cup competition for the winner of all MLS's rivalry cups. So don't give them any ideas. However, that doesn't exist. So that's to me what a treble is. And if you want to, here's the thing about the MLS season this year, Kevin, in my opinion, you could jump in and tell me if I'm wrong here. To me, both Toronto and Dallas are still in line to win doubles or trebles, but I don't think they're in line to win the same one. Well, they could win the same one in the sense they could both win Support Shield MLS Cup, but if they win one of the two and one is their national cup, I think that TFC's won a Canadian domestic treble, if that happens, or double, and Dallas has won an American domestic one. I think they're different things, right?
Well, one, because it's only for a Canadian team, and one is only possible for American teams. So you would say there's a Canadian treble in North America, and you could say there's an American treble in North America. What would be the North American treble? Winning CONCACAF, Supporters Shield, and MLS Cup? That would be the North American treble?
Yeah, well, yeah, you could add the CCL in there, and you'd be looking at a quad or treble if you include it. Yeah, it's just that's exactly what it is. It's just a competitive trophy. It's a competitive rewarded trophy, right? So if you add it to your mix, that's another trophy you've won. So potentially an MLS team could win a quad, That is the highest that they could do in any single season. They could win a CCL, but of course would be the conclusion of a previous year for them to do it into a single season. But nonetheless, that's where it is. It's not complicated. It doesn't have to be complicated because it doesn't matter. It's not a real, like, there's no
like an extra trophy for winning a treble.
Yeah, it's just something to say. And if TFC were to win the MLS Cup and the Supporters Shield and have won the Voyageurs Cup, you're damn right they're going to celebrate this season here as a treble-winning season, because why wouldn't they? They won 3 trophies. And you in America that they want to look at that and look down at the Voyageurs Cup and go, oh, it doesn't count. Well, what the hell are you talking about? Of course it counts. It's a Canadian treble. It's, maybe you can argue that it's not as difficult to win as an American treble, and you'd probably be right. Although I don't think the U.S. Open Cup is that much more difficult to win than the Voyageurs Cup, but that's a different topic. But certainly then someone, Manchester United in 1999 fans, they're going to go, well, what the hell are you talking about? It's a hell of a lot harder to win our treble than it was to win yours. And you're getting into that kind of like, what measuring contest at that point. Yes. So who cares?
Exactly. Speaking of Canada and soccer, let's take a break, Duane, and come back and talk about the Vancouver Whitecaps moving on in the CONCACAF Champions League.
You are listening to Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
Is Alphonso Davies the best Canadian player playing in North America right now?
No. I didn't expect that question off the top. No, he's not the best Canadian player playing in North America right now. I tried to think who that would be off the top of my head, but certainly I think that there's much more accomplished Canadian players playing right now. But he's absolutely, I'll say this. Alphonso Davies is absolutely the most talented 15-year-old Canadian playing right now in the world, let alone
playing at the highest
America.
level. Playing at the highest level probably of any 15-year-olds out there.
Yeah, exactly. Alphonso Davies.
Let's talk about that hype train, Duane. Is it time to push it? Is it time for Gold Cup 2017 cap him, or should we just let it be? Just let him play and see where it goes.
Good enough, you're old enough. If you're old enough, you're good enough. Right?
Yeah,
Which
true.
way that go? Yeah, good enough, old enough. That's how he
looked like
goes.
the best Vancouver player when he stepped on the pitch last night, just like he usually does.
Yeah. Look. First off, he scored the winning goal in extra time after assisting on the other goal Vancouver scored. So he was very much the man of the match, or the boy of the match, if you prefer. He's still only 15 years old.
Still 4 years away of drinking the majority of Canada.
Yeah, turned 16 on November 2nd, folks. So that's who Alphonso Davies is. And look, I don't. Okay, we're always so careful about not wanting to, because Canadian soccer is closely tied to American soccer. Obviously, the comparison is a do, and no one wants to create a second a do, and that's reasonable. But I don't gather when I talk to people within the Canadian soccer circle, I don't get this idea that they're trying to overpush him, that they're trying to oversell him, that the hype that is being generated around him is basically organic. It's people at the fan level going, wow, this kid's 15 and he's pretty good, and we should watch him. I don't see a lot of, like, we haven't seen him on the front of Sports Illustrated yet with Pele, right? Like it's not that over the top. So I asked this morning to get to your direct, the hype train. My second poll that I asked today was whether we should cap Alphonso Davies in the 2017 Gold Cup, as Kevin asked at the top. And right now the respondents are 91-9 that
for yes.
Should. Yes. Now, part of that's because
you had prominent people answering that question to your Twitter feed as well, which was very interesting. People in the world of soccer development wise at that level were saying yes to it.
Yeah, look, it's, if you're good enough, you're old enough is the question there. And I think that we shouldn't over push it, right? We shouldn't put him in a position to fail, but at the same time, we shouldn't also put the brakes on him overly, because ultimately you look around the world and you do see 16, 17-year-olds debuting at a high level all the time. So I don't necessarily see a problem next year when he'll be 16 and a half, basically, when the Gold Cup starts. Assumedly will have played, if the Whitecaps get eliminated in the playoffs down the stretch, you imagine he'll get a start or two, and you would think that he'll get significant minutes in the preseason next year. You'll imagine that he'll be part of the Canadian U20 setup in Costa Rica for qualifying in February. So by that time, he will have been more battle tested than he is even right now, and I just don't see a problem. Now, he's also eligible by his birth to Liberia, so there is that aspect to it as well. There's no indication. He's played at the Canadian U15 and U16 level and for the U20s as well in a friendly against England earlier this year. So he's played for Canada.
Which Canada won, by the way. 2-1.
Exactly.
Rashford scored for England, but Balou Tabla scored for Canada.
Yes, exactly. It was a good little match that day.
I have to point it out. Anytime Canada beats England at any level, we have to mention it. It's like in the rules of the show.
Yeah, and they drew them the year before. Jordan Hamilton scored the tying goal and celebrated in front of the English fans, and that was kind of a fun game. But that was a year ago, and we don't have much to cheer for up here, so give us this. At any rate, and that speaks to it too, actually. Jokes aside, we're just straight out of World Cup qualifying. So the fact that there's Canadian national team fans that are kind of going, okay, well, I'm excited about this kid, and I want to see whether he's playing in the Gold Cup next year, and I want to see what he looks like at the national team level, and I hope that he continues to get starts at his club at the Whitecaps. I don't think that's unhealthy at all. I think that shows that there's an interest in this program that goes beyond sort of the glory of it. And that's funny to say because there's no glory in supporting the Canadian national team. It's about, loyalty and sort of murderous
disregard for human emotions.
Yeah, exactly. So by and large, I think that it's healthy that Canadians are having this discussion about Davies. And he did, as I said, he scored the goal that put the Whitecaps through to the quarterfinals of the Champions League last night. Now, they probably were pretty safe anyway, even with the draw, but nonetheless, that's a big goal in his first professional goal fully professional goal for the Whitecaps. I shouldn't say that's hard. I'm being weird about that because the USL is obviously a professional league too, and he scored there. But his first MLS level goal, I guess is how to put it.
First team goal, maybe. First team goal.
Something like that. It gets complicated because the USL, it's a unique situation in world football, really. So it's kind of hard to qualify. But nonetheless, he scored his first goal for the fully first team of the Whitecaps playing in a competitive match. So that's a significant thing there. And that suggests to me, as someone pointed out to this poll question, it's like, well, if he's good enough to get minutes in MLS and not look at a place, then yeah, he's good enough to sit on the bench for Canada and go on for 10 minutes to get cap tied. Kevin Elliman, we did that a few years ago. We essentially shoved him on for 3 minutes. We haven't seen him since. And Elliman was never anywhere close to as hyped or as good as it seems as Davies is. So absolutely.
Why not make sure that he doesn't change his mind down the road and goes out somewhere else? Liberia might not be the sexiest other choice if you have Canada and Liberia. For once, we might have that bigger end of that stick, but still, why not cap him? Why not leave Vouts creep in? Let's just do it.
Yeah, look, Liberia is a team that is ranked at about the same level as Canada right now. So certainly there's no greater chance of making a World Cup with them, I wouldn't suggest. With Canada, at least you get the guarantee of the Gold Cup every second year.
At least you get the guarantee of getting paid.
Yeah, you have to.
And having infrastructures and stuff.
There's a lot of logistical issues with playing with an African national team too. That would make that complicated. I don't think there's much chance he's going to select them unless he feels a real obligation to sort of pay back his heritage, which is something that some players do feel. So, and if he does feel that, then, who am I to say it's wrong, really? However, as I said, by virtue of the fact that he has been in the Canadian system since he was a boy, he still is a boy, really, but since he was a very young boy.
Yeah, that could have been since 3 years.
Yeah.
He's a boy.
And he's to me, he's an example of why it's important to have development in this country. Though, this is a guy that 10 years ago, if you look at the landscape of Canadian soccer 10 years ago, he probably would have had to leave. He would have had to would have either stagnated at a local club here that really wouldn't have pushed his development, and then probably went to the NCAA and had kind of a half decent time there. And maybe if he really excelled, might have sort of came on as a borderline MLS player or the Super Draft or something. But now, because he has these options, both in Edmonton, and I think we should, again, stress that he came out of Edmonton first, and they played a role in his development. I'm not discounting what the Whitecaps have done with him, but they certainly, the Eddies deserve credit too. So he came out of Edmonton and had that professional opportunity there. There's professional coaches, that high level of coaching to try and mold that talent a little bit further. When they recognized, Edmonton did, that he needed a higher level to be pushed to, they let him walk to Vancouver, and that was, I think, big of them and significant of them to do. And the Whitecaps have then, of course, taken advantage of having this talent there and are using him now and bringing him along at a pace that I think is perfectly reasonable. So this is a player, to finish that thought, that may have been lost 10 years ago, and now he isn't. And because he wasn't lost, and because he's been in a professional environment playing with people, with kids that are playing for Canada all the time, I don't really have a fear that he's going to walk away. Had Owen Hargreaves come up through the same system, and this is, we laugh, but had the Eddies existed and Owen Hargreaves had managed to go hook up with them when he was 12 years old and then moved to the Vancouver Whitecaps in Major League Soccer before maybe moving on to Bayern Munich or Manchester United, then there's a better chance. I'm not going to say it would have been a for sure chance, but there certainly would have been a better chance that he would have chose to stay with his the nation of his upbringing.
Let's just go back to the Whitecaps for a second, Duane. In the CONCACAF Champions League, good result for them. They're almost shifting their eggs in that basket, probably going to move on from the group stage and into
They
that.
are going to move on. They clinched last night.
So it's official now. They're going to move on. Didn't have the most complicated group with Kansas City and the other team from the Caribbean, but going on to the quarterfinals. What would you expect if you're a Vancouver Whitecaps fan? What would you like? Would you like a Pachuca? Would you like, or more of a Alajuelense type, maybe a team that you can step up against and almost secure a place in the semifinals?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question, and certainly, I have a different perspective because I've seen lots of Champions League football here in Eastern Canada. I've been to games in Montreal. I've been to lots of games in Toronto. So I don't have that novelty factor there. The Whitecaps, if I were a Whitecaps fan, though, I would want to get one of the bigger clubs in the quarterfinals because that's going to allow them to market it, to really push that they have this big club in, because, let's face it, if you get one of the Costa Rican teams or another MLS team, God forbid, as your quarterfinal opponent, how much is that really exciting?
Here's the deal, Duane. The way the tournament is set, if you get a big opponent in the quarters and you win, you have a chance of getting, they're taking the spot of that team, and you're getting a lower ranked team in the semi. So, a la Montreal, if you beat a Pachuca, then you get an Alajuelense, which you're beatable, which you might have a ticket for the final that way.
Yeah, in Montreal, Vancouver too, because of the seeding, the way that they do it now, they're 9 points. So they're going to be set up pretty well to get a team that's beatable in that quarterfinal. But I still think that you want to get rid of America or whoever in that first game. Like, if you lose to them, you lose to them because they're a damn good team and you had a chance to measure yourself against them. You're always going to, even against a Costa Rican team, if you draw them in that quarterfinal stage, you're up against it because they're more in game shape at that time. So you might as well go up against the Mexican team that you can then have said that you had them up there and you saw them in your dome and you were able to sort of take advantage of the fact that maybe they're not quite firing in all cylinders yet, because it's still early for them too. And I think that's just the benefit. But then again, if you're a Whitecaps fan, you may just look purely at the idea that you want to go deep. And especially since, as I've said many times before, and I think most Whitecaps fans would agree now, it does seem like this is a lost season in the sense of the playoffs. So if you're coming off that bitter taste, you want to have an opportunity maybe in that quarterfinal to start firing.
CCL bringing redemption to Canadian MLS teams since 2011.
Yeah, 2008 even, really. I guess not MLS teams, but nonetheless. It's,
well, it's true. 2008, 2009, it gave like a boost. Who knows where the Montreal Lineback would be today if the CONCACAF Champions League didn't exist in 2008, 2009.
Yeah. One final question on that, and this is one that I've always rejected even having the conversation about when people bring it up to me, but with the Canadian Premier League now seemingly set to go for 2018, I mean, we're still waiting for that official announcement before we celebrate, but nonetheless, with a lot of reports suggesting that once the Canadian Premier League is up and running, what are your thoughts on that? Should the CSA, should they be pushing for 2 spots? Is that even reasonable? Should the Premier League team get the spot rather than the Voyageurs Cup winning team? What are your thoughts there, Kevin?
Keeps the Voyageurs Cup. CPL team goes into the Voyageurs Cup.
So you
bigger tournament, not bigger tournament as number of games you play, just a different format. The famous open, like now I have like 3 teams, 5 with the NASL teams. Add 8 to the mix. That's 13. Maybe if you can get this to 14 to some reason, 14, you have a single bracket tournament and you're gonna get a winner. There's ways to do it.
Yeah, well, no, I understand. Yeah, the Voyageurs Cup. I think that the argument is whether or not Canada would then, based on their success of taking teams to the quarterfinals, whether they deserve a second spot. That would be the argument.
Technically, maybe one for the league, and one, if you look at the MLS side of thing, where there's 3 for the league, 1 for U.S. Open Cup, maybe you can do it this way with Canada, 1 for the league and 1 for the Voyageurs Cup. But it seems unfair that way for MLS teams in Canada because they only have 1 shot of getting that 2 tickets compared to the CPL and ASL team, or the CPL if there's any ASL team left in Canada. By then we'll see. But the CPL teams would have 2 opportunities to get those spots. So maybe that way is even unfair for the MLS teams in Canada.
Yeah, well, then again, you could argue that right now the MLS teams in Canada only have 1 shot at the CCL, whereas the American MLS teams have 3. So
yes.
It's the life is never fair, but nonetheless, it's just an interesting thought exercise. I do in the past when people have argued with me that Canada should have 2 spots based on their success, I go, no, not until there's more teams to compete in it, because that's just a silly argument to me. But at any rate, all
exactly.
Right, Kevin,
let's take a small break. When we come back, we'll be talking about some interesting article on The Guardian about the Fort Lauderdale Strikers. You're listening to Soccer Today on SPN Radio. You can find the on-demand version of this very show on iTunes, Stitcher, Feedburner, Podbay Player, Podbean, anywhere you get your podcasts under the Sports Podcasting Network feed. Subscribe to our YouTube page to make sure you never miss a live show talking about soccer today, the MLS postgame show, Open Lines After Dark, 5 Rings Daily during the Olympics. Make sure you subscribe and give us a follow on Twitter at SportsPodNet, and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network. Duane, we had earlier this few months ago, we talked about Fort Lauderdale, how there was late payments, bouncing checks, and there's more to the story now. The current owners, which is Brazilian-based rich guy, a businessman, with some minority partner, including Ronaldo, not Cristiano. We talk about the fat one. So those people are maybe trying to sell the club as well. And there's some more recent allegation of late payment as well.
Certainly the Guardian details a lot of talks to a lot of people close to the Fort Lauderdale scene to talk about the situation there, and just frames it in the context of overall the NASL right now and some of the issues that are happening there at that lower level. And they just did even further framing it into the complications of running a quote unquote minor league soccer franchise within the North American boundaries. But certainly the late payment analogy that's in there is a bit concerning, but also I think there's a lot of lessons in this article. If you haven't read it, it's on The Guardian. It's widely available today. If you just search Fort Lauderdale on Twitter, you'll find it. It talks about the importance of local ownership, and I think this is something that the NASL really needs to take a look at, and maybe even needs to start prioritizing when it's adding teams to it. Because right now what we're seeing, at least what I'm seeing from a slightly outside perspective from the NASL, is this inclination to take whatever money can come around. And sometimes they're prioritizing, in my opinion, the sexy over the practical. And this is kind of what the Fort Lauderdale situation suggested, that Ronaldo was attached to this. And there was even suggestion, if you remember back 3 years ago when the team was announced, that
he would play.
That he would play, and of course that never happened. And if you read the article,
that's good that it never happened.
Well, it probably was good for everyone involved, yes. But if you read the article,
how good would it have been for the league if Fat Ronaldo comes in and scores like 5 goals a game?
Yeah,
exactly.
Well, it wouldn't have been great for the league. There's no doubt in terms of the reputation. I mean, then again, the Teflon leagues in North America sometimes when it comes to stuff like that, I mean, how good is it for MLS that a backup at Juventus is dominating the league? But nonetheless, we move on.
All right, we move on. Moving on.
Yeah. What I found telling about the article, again, and it comes back to this local ownership. They were talking about how they pushed it and how they pushed this Brazilian image on there, and they brought in Brazilian players that had somewhat of a name recognition without really considering whether they fit or what position they played, even in some cases, and just sort of slotted them in with the idea that that just simply by opening the door and saying, hey, look, Brazilians, that the crowds would come. And they completely ignored and got rid of a lot of local backing, a lot of local coaches, a lot of local technical people that understood the market around there. They sort of moved away from that and decided to go in on their own and just sort of push their own agenda on it. And what would suggest is one of the reasons they're struggling, and they are struggling. Their average attendance is down around 1,500 right now. They even had a game where they alleged that the attendance was 445 people for the middle of the week. That screams Division One. I don't know what does it, right? 445 people at a game. There's League One games with more people than that. But at any rate.
Yes, there's a lot of USL games with a lot more people than that.
Yeah, exactly. So, this suggests to me that you're not engaged with the local community and to have continued to take, and then you go to the Oklahoma City situation we talked about a week or so ago with the turf and all that junk, and it's just a mess. You factor all that in, you look at it, you go, I think maybe the NASL needs to, as I said a moment ago, they need to maybe even institute a rule that there has to be a certain amount of local ownership at every franchise, because otherwise you're just setting yourself up for further kind of distant sort of play toy kind of scenarios where the people coming in may understand the game. They may understand the game around the world, but they don't understand that market, and they just assume that they can flip a switch and it works, and it doesn't work that way. Selling the sport in this country, especially when you don't have the MLS label on, and I understand that the NASL fans listening to this will point to that as the only reason there's a problem, and I think that that's a bit myopic. You have to look beyond that. There are mistakes NASL is making that are contributing to this. If you don't have that local knowledge, that local consideration, that local sort of attachment, then why would someone, when you have you have a plasma TV in your living room with the whole world at your fingertips, and maybe twice a year you travel up to the local MLS team because that's in your mind the perception, and perception is reality. That's the better division for you. So Kevin, there's just a lot going on with that article that really speaks to everything that we've been talking about for a long time on this show.
No, exactly. And it's hopefully we have a better resolution to hopefully they find an owner, because the team seems to be on the sale market. There's no confirmation, but like the Guardian article is mentioning, seem to be looking for a way to offload the team is basically the way it was mentioned. There was woes this season. They had to change stadium as well in mid-course of the season because of lease and many other reasons. So not an easy season for the Strikers. Hopefully this franchise, which is a mainstay in the NASL, continues find a way to get new owners, new investment for next year to go on to better things. Because right now, if you're a Fort Lauderdale Striker, it seems like doomy and gloomy, even though on the pitch it's not that bad.
Yeah, no, they've been doing pretty well on the pitch. There's some talent there for sure, but you can't engage in that market. And I wonder, too, whether there's an oversaturation of NASL soccer in Florida at this point, too. There's a lot of teams down there. Fairly close together. You've got Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and Tampa. I know Tampa's a little bit further away.
Talking about you should talk about the population of those areas, Florida as well. It's the age demographic, all those things involved into getting people at your soccer stadiums. We're talking about tough marketing jobs over there to get the mobilization of fans, to get thousands of people in your stands. I'm over exaggerating here, but there's a lot of retirement community, a vacation community, a holiday settings where people are come and gone and not there for the long run. So it's hard to get that commitment, to get those peoples in the stands day in, day out, week in, week out, because of the general aspect of where those teams are located.
It's the leagues play in the summer too, and it is really, really hot in the summer in South Florida. That seems simplistic, but it's if you've ever been down there in the summer, and first off, I'm sorry, but second off, you'll understand how unappealing it would be to go sit outside for 90 minutes in the dead heat, right? Like, there's a lot of challenges to operating a team down there, and as MLS learned when they had to retract two of them back in the darker days of Major League Soccer.
Fusion Miami, right? Those were the two. Fusion was Miami.
Tampa, yeah. It's a difficult place to operate, and MLS has been looking to try and find a way back in there for years. We've joked about it. We make jokes all the time about David Beckham in Miami and all that, but it's
never going to happen.
It illustrates how difficult it is, how challenging that market is to get stuff done, because it's just not necessarily a place that that is going to go out in wild numbers to support the local team. So without that backing, without that groundswell of interest, you have trouble getting stadiums built. You have trouble getting tickets sold. You have trouble on a lot of different levels, and it's just a tough market. And to have as many teams as Fort Lauderdale as Florida does now, although Jacksonville's northern Florida, so it's almost a different market. But nonetheless,
it's closer to Georgia. It's going to be closer to Atlanta than it is to the other Florida teams.
Well, exactly, yeah. So, but there's still 4 teams in Florida is the bottom line, and that may be just way too much for any, for that area when they've had such a poor history. Tampa Bay seems pretty solid right now. The Rowdies do seem like one of the better run, although they have some chaos there too last year with the coaching situation. But nonetheless, they do seem within NASL terms to be one of the better run teams. So there is some solid play down there. But nonetheless, the other teams are all kind of floundering around. Jacksonville's seen a major decrease in their attendance after the first year as well. So you have to ask questions about that. And I it's not that I wish the NASL ill will. I certainly do not. I found it an interesting, fascinating place. I've been to NASL games. I would consider myself a Fury fan and an Eddie's fan because I want the Canadian programs to do well. But nonetheless, it's
a lot of things this season, Duane, have made the perception and the optics of this league, or maybe uncovered what the true aspect of this league are, with a lot of different aspects this year. We're talking about the Oklahoma situation, even Ottawa's situation recently, where there's talks of maybe they're not going to be in the NSL next year. So there's a lot of rumors and uncertainty, I think is the best way to put it, about NASL and its future because of the landscape of many of the teams right now.
Yeah, look, and I read somewhere someone that complained that shows like ours and other MLS, they call them MLS focused shows, only talk about the NASL when something goes wrong. And I think we try to talk about the results too and put that out there a little bit. We have lots of shows on this network. We have other shows on this network that certainly do on a complete focus put it on. So I'm going to defend ourselves that way. But nonetheless, I also ask people that say that we're only looking at the negative stuff is, how do you ignore when an owner is stealing your turf in the middle of the night? Like, this is absurd stuff that just can't be ignored. Yes. And what good's happening? What good stories are out there? Then pitch me some good stories. I mean, if you're not getting mainstream story, you get out there.
Traffic generates what the content is going to be, and not just on our side. Specifically not on our side. We decide what the content is usually, but we're talking about generally, the clicks of NASL teams going down gets a lot more clicks than the articles about how a great season it is for the Eddies this year.
Yeah, look, and I think we've talked a lot about the Eddies this year, and certainly as we did with the Fury last year, as the season progressed, as we got to the postseason, we did a whole show where we previewed, we did an NASL Soccer Bowl preview last year in this show, so which was entirely focused on the turf stuff and the great story in Ottawa, and we talked to Cosmos people and the whole 9 yards. So we do that stuff when it warrants it. But the problem is that it's hard to find good stories with the NASL right now. It really is, and that's unfortunate. I mean, we have a new team coming in next year in San Francisco, so they're on the West Coast finally. That's good news. But is that going to be completely buried with the fact that we're going to lose Oklahoma City, maybe Ottawa, and maybe Fort Lauderdale too? I mean, it's a revolving door of a league right now. And yes, there is that argument out there of why that's the case. But I think that, as I said a moment ago, there's a hell of a lot more nuance to that. And you have to sort of look beyond one single issue as being why the league is failing. There are some really poor decisions that have been made as well, and that is contributing majorly to what is happening.
No, absolutely, Duane, it is for sure. But it's going to be interesting to follow as well the Fort Lauderdale Striker situation if they do find an owner before the winter and get a chance to get ready and rebuild the foundation of this franchise that has some great history in this league this time around and prior time around.
Precisely, yeah. I mean, look, they're great names. Certainly, I like the fact that the old names are back in a rotation. I reject the idea that they're the same team. That's something that I don't think it kind of does a disservice to the history, including the failures of the past. But nonetheless, certainly it's nice to have those old names around. And you want every market in North America to do well, but certainly you need good ownership to do that. And I'm seeing a lot of examples of bad ownership within the NASL.
We have. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, Duane, We'll be reviewing yesterday and previewing today's match of the Champions League.
You are listening to SPN Radio, powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
Yeah, you know, when Brendan Rodgers took over at Celtic, I don't think he expected to go to almost the butcher shop in a game. 7-0 Barcelona.
Yeah, and that's coming off the heels of Celtic beating Rangers 5-1, which suggests to me that the Scottish Premier League.
So by a weird analogy, Barcelona destroyed Rangers.
It was, yeah, I mean, it does sort of speak. If Celtic is that much better than the rest of the Scottish League, then how do they ever close that gap to Barcelona again? And this is a league that, if you're a recent fan, you'll think that they've always been this bad, but there was a time 15, 20 years ago when the Scottish Premier League teams were doing okay in Europe. You could look at their success going way back, the long-time success for Celtic to win the Champions League, actually, but even in relatively recent terms, both Rangers and Celtic have had some success there. So the fact that these teams are getting spanked down this much, and if you look at Celtic's ride into the Champions League group stage as well, they got a pretty favorable draw, and they still struggled to get through it. And I think, and then you look to last year where they only got to the final qualifying stage of the playoff stage based on a team having the result overturned. So there's been a lot of struggles for Celtic in the preliminary stages of the Champions League in recent years, and they have made it back into the group stage this year, regardless of the fact that they lost to an amateur team and they lost to an Israeli team of very little reputation in the playoff in the second leg, and they managed to win both those ties. But nonetheless, there were some warning signs, is what I'm trying to say out there, and that 7-0 is a bit of an embarrassment, and it's Mönchengladbach and City are the other two teams in their group, and it's not going to be much more prettier, I don't think, in either of those games.
Mönchengladbach is going to put 2-3 past Celtic.
Well, no doubt about it. And then, Man City is certainly
hopefully more to that.
Yeah, they have the Barcelona and the English team trying to emulate Barcelona with all Barcelona staff there now, right? So it's not a pretty thing for Celtic at this moment,
and it's not going to become prettier as well. The other results yesterday, Duane: FC Basel won, Ludogorets won. Borjan was on the bench, but interesting for Ludogorets, they get a great result against a FC Basel team that we could consider favorite in that matchup. Bayern Munich, FC Rostov, the other big victory for Bayern Munich that happened in the Champions League yesterday, 5-0 against lowly Rostov.
Yeah, and that's certainly a team that's had a lot of success in recent years. They broke a record for their own team in terms of group stage wins yesterday with that. Bayern Munich, even with Pep's, going to keep ticking along. They're amongst the thing about the Champions League, and we all know this if we watch this, there are tiers of possibilities here. And really, there are probably, 5 teams, 6 teams maybe that
even then there's like 2 of those 5 that can actually realistically win it.
Yeah, you're looking at the Spanish teams.
Barca, Madrid, Atletico maybe this year.
Yeah, Atletico's been the final two of the last 3 years. So you can't discount them, obviously, although they haven't managed to get it done.
Yeah.
So Barca, Real Madrid, Atletico Madrid, it depends. Bayern Munich, they're your 4. Juve, put them in the mix, probably maybe 5. If you're looking at
City,
United, depends on what you think of the English teams. Whether you're going to add from there is really what it comes down to.
Yeah, basically. So as well, we mentioned the Barca Celtic. PSG won, Arsenal won. Arsenal on the road, able to get that result at the Stade des Princes. Man City, Mönchengladbach postponed. It's going to happen today. So Mother Nature won that first leg game. PSV Eindhoven lost 1-0 to Madrid. Dinamo Atletico this one. Dinamo Kiev won. Napoli 2. Napoli on the road. Napoli slowly bridging the gap with Juve as the best team in Italy, with a great player like the mainstay in Hamšík in the midfield. Another great player like this for Napoli. This club is really slowly turning it around. And Benfica Besiktas. And if you haven't seen this game, first of all, great result for Besiktas at home against Benfica, but one player of Benfica was destroyed by a goal inside its own box. The ball was kicked 2 feet away from his face and landed right on the kisser. Poor guy. I think he's still reeling from that hit, but great victory or result, you should say, for Benfica and Besiktas in that group.
Yeah, no, those are two teams that are probably going to be battling for the for that group there and to advance. So they're two solid teams. A lot of as we know, there's been a lot of problems in Turkey politically speaking over the last few years. So that they can regroup to play some soccer on Atiba Hutchinson's team too as well. So currently that's a good result. I did want to go back to what was it? Oh, never mind. Keep going forward, Kevin. I lost my train of thought.
Perfect. So we have today, Wednesday, September 14th, Tottenham, Monaco, Bruges, Club Bruges in Leicester. Got it? I said it right, I think, this time. Leicester. So Club Bruges and Leicester. For Leicester, they're on the road against Club Bruges, a team that they should beat. But a first big European match for Leicester almost in its history. It's going to be interesting to see how it unfolds today, because it's not gut check time yet, but they kind of have to win today on the road to make sure that people are not too scared of their Champions League future.
Yes, Leicester, that's obviously the game today that most people will be probably looking at, because Leicester hasn't really started the season very well, and we'll see how they can do in the Champions League. And as I said off the draw, and I do maintain this, and I know someone who happened to start cheering for Leicester about 4 years ago, so he kind of won the lottery that way. I talked to him about this, and it was like, wouldn't you rather just draw in Real Madrid or something in the group? And he kind of hemmed and hawed, because you kind of want to win, but at the same time, are you really going to get back? Are you going to get another chance? It's an interesting question to ask yourself there. So yeah. I do think, and I predicted after the start of the year, that Leicester, the way that they play, I think it lends itself to the fact that if they get a favorable draw, which they did, that they might be able to escape that group. And I think that'll be something that's significant for that club, obviously. Well, the money will be significant alone. So there you go.
Legia Warsaw versus Dortmund, Lyon versus Dinamo Zagreb, Bayer versus CSK Moscow, and we have Real Madrid Sporting, very interesting matchup, Juve Sevilla. Will Sevilla stay in the Champions League for once, or will they go back and win Europa League? That's the question.
Sevilla should have advanced last year, and I say this as a Manchester City supporter who watched both those games against City and still shakes my head trying to figure out how the hell City won both those games, because they're a solid team. I believe that they probably will eventually have a long run in this Champions League, and I can see Sevilla doing what Atletico has done in recent years and be an upset team in the final, Kevin.
Yeah, that could be very interesting. We have that Man City Mönchengladbach game 2:45 and Porto Copenhagen. Another interesting matchup. FC Porto can maybe continue their great run of success on the continental level over the last few months with great players from its ranks winning the European Championship this summer.
Yes, exactly. And certainly had some good results in the early part of the World Cup qualifying as well against Holland. So some stuff there to watch for sure. The Mönchengladbach City game, 2:45. Not sure what the TV situation is on that. That's a unique situation to see a game rained out. But if you saw the images on Twitter of the train station in Manchester and so on and so forth, it was absolutely insane, the storm that hit them. So it probably was the right decision nonetheless. And it's good. It's a good thing. An interesting 2 point is that the Mönchengladbach, as a club, being a German club, it has some left-wing kind of thinking about it sometimes. It has decided to refund the price of the tickets for all of its traveling fans that went, regardless of whether they can go today or not. So the tickets remain valid, but they're going to give them their money back too, because they had to stay the extra day. And I think that's a nice little gesture that the Mönchengladbach has done for its traveling fans.
And they wanted to make sure, because one day of postponement, Duane, it's one day more of hotel accommodation, one day more of maybe you can't stay in the hotel. You need to find a place to stay. Maybe you're going to be outside for that night. So there is a way to make sure that pill is easier to swallow for your fan support, and make sure that they do show up for the game, even though it's like 1 day late. It's the classy way to go.
Yeah, it is the right decision, I think. And obviously some people might not have been able to stay because they might have had 1 day flights, right? Like, that's the nature of Europe. You can get a flight in and out pretty quickly.
Yeah, people will work and everything. So no, exactly. So that's the interesting aspect. You're trying to make sure your supporters come and support you, even though you had to postpone the game.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a nice gesture there. We should always point out the good when it's there. And I thought that was something that was good. Gladbach's always been a team that I've had a bit of a soft spot for in Germany. I don't really have a German team per se, but Rob Friend, the Canadian international, played for Gladbach for a long time when they were in the B2. Was leading scorer in B2 1 year for Gladbach. So it's a club that I've had a bit of a soft spot. I just won't today at 2:45 Eastern time.
No, exactly. For those 90 minutes, you were not going to care at all about that club.
Yes, exactly. And there's actually a great history of Gladbach with North American players, both American and Canadians, that have done pretty well for them. So I think there's probably a few more than other sort of, I don't want to call them minor because Gladbach has a great history, but sort of non-Bayern Munich and Dortmund German clubs. There's probably more supporters of Gladbach than most because of that history with the Canadian and American players.
Let us know which game interests you on Twitter at SportsPodNet. You can send us an email, sportspodcastingnetwork@gmail.com, and make sure you subscribe to our YouTube page. Look for Sports Podcasting Network and SPN Radio to find your links to all live shows every day, Monday to Friday, 11 a.m. on YouTube, Stitcher, Feedburner, Podbay Player, iTunes, anywhere you get your podcasts. You can listen to Soccer Today. And until tomorrow, 11 a.m. for Duane Rollins, I am Kevin Laramee. Well, have a great soccer. You were listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us, sportspodcastingnetwork.com.